I'm joined by Angus McNeil, MP, and Roseanna Cunningham, MSP. Thanks both for joining us. First of all, Angus McNeil, you heard there the comment towards the end of those Vox Pops, the woman saying, I think you're doing a fine job in government, but no to separation. That's still something that's going to come your way, isn't it? People don't want to break up the relationships, the social relationships that they see they have with England.
Well, no one wants to break up the social relationships that we have. We keep our social relationship with a multitude of countries. But I think people are seeing that if you name any power that pertains to Scotland, you're better off having that controlled in Holyrood rather than at Westminster. And I think
I was slightly distracted by a giant rabbit walking through the back of the set. Sorry, carry on. You were doing awfully well.
I think when people are asked the question about the powers and where do you want your government to be, in London or in Holyrood, and I think people far prefer having the decisions that affect their lives made in Edinburgh rather than being made in London. And I think when you break the powers of independence apart out of the abstract into the concrete, there's far greater support for devolving what's left in Westminster back to Holyrood.
But you've got substantial power already devolved to Holyrood.
Indeed.
There could be perhaps by agreement further powers. What does independence bring other than disruption and problems that would add to that mix?
Well, we don't accept the disruption argument, and what independence will bring is the benefits that we're seeing already with devolution, but to the maximum, because it won't just apply to those areas that are devolved. Independence means that we would be able to bring those benefits to all areas of policy, all parts of society, all issues that would be under that. And I think that, Angus is right. What we're seeing now is people within specific sectors beginning to say, hang on a second, we can see a far better way for our sector to be run. But you begin to add all that up, and I think that the logic of independence becomes increasingly clear. And I appreciate there are some people who are going to stay thorough to the old constitutional setup, but equally we saw in that Vox Pop other people volunteering that actually they felt that the time was right to be moving on.
I mean, independence just means devolving the rest of the powers.
Yeah.
That's it.
Just a little simple as that. Just as simple as that. As simple as ending a 300-year-old union and negotiating negotiating the debt and all of these issues.
If there's a will, there's a way. And I think the new SNP government have shown that. If there's a will, there's a way.
It's an enormous deal. It will be a huge change.
I think when we see what's been devolved and we devolve the rest, it'll happen seamlessly, and you'll be reading headlines of that in the future.
Take a look at this front page on the Independent. I don't know if you can see it properly. Scotland 10. England 0, and they're talking about the advantages, free school dinners, free bus transport for pensioners, smaller class sizes, etc. Advantages, Roseanna, that have been, the Independent is saying, the newspaper is saying, have been brought about, but through devolution. Again, why do you need the what your opponents say would be the disruption of independence?
Because we could make that 10-0, 30-0. And the real question that's raised by the front page of the Independent, which I found highly amusing, is not that Scotland has these advantages, but that for English voters to be actually turning to their political leadership saying, how is it that we are not also benefiting? Why are these decisions not being made in England? Instead of saying they shouldn't be getting made in Scotland, because the whole point about the devolution settlement was we could make those decisions. And I would simply say to those decisions you could add yet many, many more. We will see more under an SNP government, but we would see infinitely more with independence.
Considering the white paper that was published, the ultimate objective there is to have a bill to bring about a referendum. Now, you ain't going to get that through Holyrood, are you? Because you only have one seat more than the Labour Party. You don't have a majority.
Let's actually allow the conversation to continue. Let's allow people in Scotland to begin to make their voices heard about what they think is the right way to proceed in this, because we all know that if you actually ask voters in the streets of Scotland if they think there ought to be a referendum about this, they are going to say yes, because they believe it is the right thing for people to be asked directly. The questions that need to be answered by those political parties who are afraid to actually put that to the people. And I think people pressure will begin to make the difference. So I wouldn't be writing off the referendum at this stage at all.
Angus McNeil.
Well, I think that other political parties also have to answer which questions do they not want to be devolved to Scotland, and why. Independence is basically a mosaic of the remaining powers.
They have to clarify.
They have to clarify what they don't want, why they don't want it. We know that all the other parties, even the Labour Party, have had an about turn since the election and want to devolve more. Now, the mechanism, I think, for further devolution is a referendum where we put all the powers up and see what people want. And the other parties then have to come and tell us and tell the people what powers they specifically don't want.
If we held your referendum and your option of independence lost, would that be it? Would that be the end of the simple game as you describe it? Would you then give in and say, OK, we accept the will of the people, it's no to independence, and we will stop campaigning for it?
Certainly not. I think you would look, as Roseanna said, to make it 30-0, and if you devolve more, you might only get to 20-0. But I would certainly continue to argue for the improvement of Scotland, and as I've seen in Iceland and in Norway and in the Faroe Islands and places like that, the more independence you've got, generally, the better the society is.
Roseanna Cunningham, is there a danger? There's always a temptation. Government's a tempting thing. It's tempting to be in government. It's nice.
It's great to be in government.
It's great to be in government. It's good fun.
There's nothing tempting about it. It's wonderful.
But I recall a phrase of Winnie Ewing when she was first elected to Westminster, and she said, we're here to settle up, not to settle down. Is there a danger that ministers and the party and the MSPs like yourselves, right, we'll do this, we'll bring in this bill, we'll do that, actually we'll cope, we'll work within the devolved settlement? Is that a hazard for your party?
Well, that's an interesting perspective to take, Brian. It's not one that I've noticed any of the opposition parties taking, it has to be said. And it's not one borne out by the first 6 months, which I think is about driving forward as much as possible and as strongly as possible. So rather than settling down, I think Winnie's comments all those years ago turned out to be extremely clear-sighted and forward-thinking, because what we are doing in government for the very first time is actually beginning to make those changes and to argue for the changes that we've always wanted. It isn't about settling down. I don't think any single one of our cabinet secretaries thinks that the position they're in now is the one they want to stay in for the next 10, 15 years. That's not the case. They want more.
Angus?
Yeah, I think so. Scotland's only going one way. The powers are only going one way. The debate's only one way. There is absolutely no debate in Scotland about returning anything to Westminster. And this is a growing phenomenon. And, you see page 3 of the Independent that you've got in front of you there. Alan Massey's held his hands up and said, I was wrong, Salmond was right, And people are changing their minds on the whole independent argument. And I think that's healthy and fresh.
What about the strategy? What tactics do you adopt in dealing with London? You're a Westminster MP, you're seeing the politics of the Parliament in London on a daily basis. Your opponents accuse your SNP ministers and the party generally of picking fights with the UK government, picking fights over spending, picking fights over policies, picking fights over every statement issued by Gordon Brown and his colleagues.
I think that's all our opponents have got left is that phrase, basically, that there's no intellectual rigour to what they're saying. I was at meetings with the Scottish NFU at DEFRA, and I asked a very direct question to the Secretary of State, Hilary Benn. Was the £8.1 million on the table, or was it not on the table?
This was the money for the sheep farmers.
This is the money for the sheep farmers, and I got fluff for an answer in front of the farmers. So when I was there, I wasn't being seen by the farmers as picking a fight. I was being seen by the farmers as standing up for their interests, and I was holding Westminster to account for running away from its responsibilities.
But Roseanna, we have yesterday Alex Salmond and John Swinney accusing the UK government of almost engineering a deliberately tight spending settlement, and yet the academic experts, the Centre for Public Policy in the regions, for example, say it wasn't engineered. It's exactly in line with Barnett. It may be tight, but it's fair. Aren't you picking a fight over that, for example?
I think we are doing, in reality, there's two sides to that particular argument. One is that I don't know a single sub-state legislature anywhere in the world that doesn't have an argument about the annual block grant. So there's a level at which that is always going to be the case. And if we imagine it wasn't happening under the previous executive, then we'd be kidding ourselves.
Having an argument is one thing. Accusing your counterparts in Westminster of fiddling the figures is something else, which you've done.
And I mean, there is a level to this debate that would have been taking place anyway. And yes, we are suspicious. And I think quite rightly so, that after 8 years of much more generous settlements, there's a change of government in Scotland, and lo and behold, suddenly we're in this new situation, apparently. Now, you can...
But it's not lo and behold, it's the Barnett consequences of the settlement.
You can simply believe in coincidence if you like, but there are one or two of us who are perhaps a little bit more suspicious of that coincidence. Having said that, the SNP government does have
You're saying it was fiddled? You're saying it's fiddled?
I am saying that I am just
Scotland.
suspicious of the coincidence that when there is a change of government... Now, we've always said, haven't we, that one of the interesting things about devolution was going to be not the time that you had the same party in power in both Westminster and in Scotland, but when there were differences. Now, for this 6 months, we're beginning to see some of the issues arising, what happens when there is difference. Now, that is a test of the devolution settlement, but it does also create question marks where in the previous 8 years there might not have been. But I think we do have to, as a government, we do have to work within what we've got, even if we don't like it. But that doesn't mean to say we're not going to say that we don't like it.
Thanks very much indeed to both of you, Angus McNeil and Roseanna Cunningham. Thanks for joining us.